This is a comic review of Detective Comics 440. This is a 100-pager. I loved 100 pages. Had quite a lot of those over the years. Sadly, I haven't got as many as I used to, but I really, really loved 100 pages. They often had a news story. This one, obviously the Batman one. And then they would have a number of reprints, sometimes from fairly recent, sort of Silver Age ones, obviously the Hawkman one there. Also got a story there of the Manhunter. And that was the reason I bought this. But you've also got Dollman, Green Lantern, etc. And also the original Manhunter, or the Golden Age Manhunter, I should say. But that's why I like these 100 pages. They were just brilliant, because a lot of these stories I would never have seen. I mean, Golden Age reprint, Golden Age stories, comics, certain were probably in the UK, but I certainly didn't have a copy. The earliest, I did eventually get a Superman back in the 80s, and it was like back in obviously the 1940s one, but they were quite expensive, the ones that were around, and my one was even coverless, so it was a real battered copy. So you got this Batman story, and it's quite a good story. There's nothing wrong with it. He's out in the countryside sorting out some, as it says, a ghost mountain midnight, and there's obviously a big creature hanging over it. Obviously, it's I'm not going to tell you the story. Obviously, there's a woman there, and that's about the whole story. It's a very short story, it's not a very long one, and then straight into, well, actually it might be, well, it's obviously 15 pages at most, because it says 15. It's got page numbering, which is always very useful. And then you've got the Manhunter story. Now this issue is falling to pieces as I open it. It's got a really lovely tear. And this is one thing I think trouble is probably, unless you really looked after these 100 pages, and also just never opened them, and you put them away in Mylar or slabbed them. I expect lots of people have slabbed all these things, and now, of course, they're in perfect condition. But even, I remember back at the time, they had these sort of very broken sort of spines. They were never the best of spines, unless you probably looked around and got a perfect edition one. So, but it's already tearing there. But you can see the folds as well, and it sort of comes apart. They did that quite regularly, so it's Manhunter battles the cobras of the deep. Obviously, it's the usual sort of story. This is 1940s one. Weirdly, it doesn't actually say when. This is obviously by Jack Kirby and Joe Simon. It doesn't say the issues it came from. There is a little bit in the magazine, the comic, later where it does say, but I will get to that shortly. But you've got obviously the Nazis as usual. Very unusual looking Nazis, but the Nazis all the same. And then octopuses involved as well. Lots of other things. Thrown a lot. They often, with these Golden Age stories, they made very little sense. They were silly stories. There were lots of punch-ups, fights, lots of people saying, we're going to go and do this. We're going to go and kill the Manhunter. The Manhunter pops up mysteriously. How he finds out where everyone is, I do not know. But still, they were generally good stories. And there's always some stupid conclusion where it's all things. But I loved them. I absolutely love those stories. I mean, they're just daft. They are really, truly daft stories. You just think, really? Yeah. However, now this is where, and it's got the Batman's hotline. I love the letters. People were moaning about the 100 pages because, of course, all the Silver Age reprints. But a lot of people would have had those comics. So people would say, oh, I've had that already. Why am I going to spend 60 cents on something? And I've already had that story. And I agree. But the Golden Age ones, a lot of people were saying, why don't put more Golden Age? However, this is the Detective 440. You got Story the Outsider, apparently it was in Detective 356, so it wasn't actually that long ago. So you were only talking, 90 issues ago. If you're a fan of the comic, you're probably thinking, well, I've got that already. So I can understand a slight moan about that. The Fear That Haunted Hawkman, this is 1964. That was obviously 10 years before. And then you've got The Cobras of the Deep. This is Adventure 79, October 1942. That's what I liked. I love those. And also, you've got here Too Many Suspects, The Green Lantern, issue 37. That was from 1949. Brilliant bit of Alex Toth. Love that. And the Green Lantern stories especially were always one I always enjoyed. I love the Golden Age Green Lantern. They were quirky stories, weird, unusual ones, thoroughly enjoyable. And I would love to see them all reprinted. I would love to see the omnibus editions come out. Golden Age omnibus all the way through the Green Lanterns. I suspect that will never happen, but maybe. However, you've got the Hawkman story, obviously Hawk Girl there as well. Murphy Addison, obviously Gardner Fox. So that story there, and that's an unusual story. Again, not particularly a great story. It's an average, okay. The usual twist at the end. However, I love the adverts. I always love the adverts. And you've got Commandy, Weird War Tales, and also It's Midnight Witching Hour. Love those ones. And then also I love those ones as well. All these I've never got one. I never ever had those sort of, well, they were probably for the car and those sort of things. These special sort of different types of tapes. Okay. However, then on to the Doll Man. Now, this Doll Man story is a bit similar to the other ones, except there's no Nazis in it. That's about it. You just got this guy who's the Undertaker. So, $1 million corpse. There's a diamond or something involved. So you've got Doll Man. Now, that was, of course, from Quality Comics. Now, of course, DC now have all the rights to Quality Comics. Back in the 50s, of course, they didn't. But so the reprints there, the Doll Man. And this Doll Man, these, for me, very few turned up at Comic Marts or anything, these sort of old feature comics. So just great little stories. I did it. I think it said which there, and then on to the next story. I mean, it's quite well drawn. I mean, it's a really good story, perfectly reasonable, but it's basically just a punch-up story where you got some guy and you can't beat me, you can't always win, sort of thing. And then, of course, you know, the Doll Man's going to win, and it always sums it up at the end with another good here. It's got some more 100 pages, and you've got this one's the Superman family. I bought that quite often, especially in the 100-page one. The Young Love, Tarzan, Lord Jungle. I love those ones. Brave and the Bold, again, they're more fairly modern ones, I think, the reprint. And Wonder Woman. I always bought the Wonder Woman. And of course, House of Mystery. You've got Green Lantern, Alex Toth, my favourite. Love Alex Toth's work. So it's an interesting story of this sort of the perfect crime where the person thinks he can get away with something. I think that story was done so often. That's also variations on the theme of that sort of thing. But the artwork was always just superb. Look at that, brilliant Alex Toth. I would love to see these reprinted. There should be a collection, Green Lanterns by Alex Toth. Now that would be superb. I'd buy that. Nice little book of that. I don't know how many stories he did, but it would be really. I always love to always have to have Green Lantern on top. No, is it the Green Lantern? I don't know. Why did they have to put Green Lantern on every single one? Very good. It'd be more interesting and useful if they put Green Lantern issue 37 or something. The actual issue it came from. That would have been more useful. Anyway. So the story resolves, of course, in a nice, usual Golden Age way, very quickly. Final page, bang, story's finished. Yep, all sold. Then we got The Outsider. Now that was obviously a reprint as well. Quite a reasonable story, not too bad. Anything to write home about. And then on to, which is the best bit of the whole magazine, I think, well, obviously the Green Lantern reprint, was the Manhunter. I loved that. I loved it at the time. I thoroughly enjoyed the Manhunter story. So I was over the moon when they brought out this collection, that's why. But sadly, I didn't keep all these issues. Should have done, because great story. Brilliant artwork. Really appreciate his artwork far more now than I did back then. Maybe at the time, I think I looked at the artwork and I thought, not so keen on this artwork, but now I really, really like it. So, change which ones you like. And then that was it. Very short story. I mean, 8 pages. That was it. Fin, as it says. And that's it. So you've got Detective Comics, 440, great range of characters, got a couple of Golden Age reprints, Silver Age reprints, and of course, an original story of Batman and Manhunter, of course, as well. I love this. I love 100 pages. I always love picking them up, but they are quite expensive now. They seem to be becoming more, unless you get a real tatty issue like this one, they are quite steep. I think they're quite popular as well. So, thoroughly enjoyable, totally recommended.